I would like to welcome you all to the June 14th Preservation Commission meeting. So I will now call the meeting to order. It is 7:01, and we have 8 commissioners present. So we have a quorum with Commissioner Dreller, the only one absent tonight. So now I'm just going to very briefly go through the procedure for the meeting tonight, since we do have a longer agenda. For those that aren't familiar, staff will read the case into record, and then we will ask the applicant to step up to the podium and introduce yourself, and then you'll have the chance to present your application. I think there is a remote sitting at the podium that you can use to navigate through, or I'm sure Cade will help assist you if you'd rather that. Once you're done giving your presentation, commissioners will ask questions about your application. And then after the question period is complete, we will have asked for public comment. So if you would like to give public comment to an application, if you can either sign in at the sign-in sheet that's at the outside the door, or there is a sign-in sheet, I believe, at the podium. If you can just sign in your name and put the application that you're speaking to. When you, Cade will ask people, I think he'll have the sheet and he'll introduce people that want to give public comment. If you do, you can step up to the podium, introduce yourself, and then you can obviously give your public comment. We ask that you keep it to 3 minutes or less, and you keep it to the purview of the commission, please. So after public comment is completed, we will ask the applicant to step back up to the podium, and if they would like to respond to anything that was said with public comment. And then they will ask to be seated, and then the commissioners will deliberate and a motion will be made. So with that, I will have Cade read the first case into record, please.
The first case tonight is 713 and 715 Sheridan Road in the Lakeshore Historic District, case number 22 PRES 0084. Catherine Flanagan, owner, submits for advisory review of a proposed subdivision between the properties at 713 Sheridan Road and 715 Sheridan Road. The commission provides a recommendation to City Council, the determining body for this case. Catherine, are you here? Thank you.
Hi, I'm Catherine Flanagan. Thanks for having me. So it's really an application for re-subdivision. The property was originally divided by the owner, Susan Lloyd, back in 2005, I think. I bought my property, 713, which is the lot 2 of the subdivision, in 2016. The previous neighbors of 713 and 715 had agreed to swap equal portions of land across the rear property line. So a portion of the south side of 715 and the north side of 713, equal land swap. It was basically straightening out the property line. It hadn't been filed before we closed on the property. We agreed that these were the new property lines. We said we would cooperate with it getting filed. We recently we're going to do an addition, and we pulled a plat of survey, realized it was never filed. So we're now in the process to kind of memorialize the agreement and the way that the properties have been used for the last 6 years.
Okay, Cade, do you want to flip through anything? Is there that the commissioners might need to?
And I don't know if this would help. I kind of made a little larger graphic. Basically, the property that belonged to 713 and went to 715 is pink. The property that belonged to 715 and went to 713 is yellow. So it was these two swaths of land were swapped. Is that it?
Are there any questions by commissioners? Okay, and then this case requires just a recommendation. So you can make either a positive or negative recommendation.
Yeah, correct. It'd be either a positive or a negative recommendation to City Council. There's some unique standards that we don't see that frequently, which I'll put up on the screen now.
So is there a commissioner that'd be willing to make the motion for a recommendation to city council for this case? Oh, Beth, go ahead. Just the section 2-8-12B. She just has to read that through the sheet, right?
Okay. Okay, I'm good. Okay, thank you. I move to issue a, well, one moment. So do I,
Yeah.
okay, got it. I move to recommend the proposed subdivision or the land swap between the properties at 713 Sheridan Road and 715 Sheridan Road. Excuse me, 713 and 715 Sheridan Road. And I recommend to the city council that we do issue that, and it is the applicable standards. And then do I just read these? So I read them out loud?
It's just the
Oh,
same
okay,
thing.
it's here.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, and the applicable sorry. And the applicable standards are code sections 2, 8, 12B, and 1, A, C, D, and E. And you know, I don't think I read the case number. Do I need to go back and read the case number? Okay.
Is there a second? Stewart seconds. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 8-0.
Yep.
Thank you. Okay, Kate, you want to read the next case for us, please?
The next case is 1214 Maple Avenue in the Ridge Historic District, case number 22 PRES 0085. Devon Herrick, owner, submits for advisory review for a proposed subdivision of 1214 Maple Avenue. Commission provides a recommendation to City Council, the determining body for this case. If you could just state your name, and then you can proceed.
Sure. Good evening. My name is Scott Stavish. I'm an ETHS graduate, a longtime resident, and a realtor. I'm here on behalf of my client, Devin and Hannah Herrick, owners of 1214 Maple. First of all, thank you for your help. Thanks for allowing me to present, and I appreciate what you guys do for our community. Hannah is here today, but unfortunately her brother could not attend as he has his own meetings this evening as a principal in CPS. The owners are seeking an approval for a subdivision of their property at 1214 Maple into 2 lots, one for the current house and coach house and a second for the vacant side lot to be confirmed as a buildable lot. By way of background, Devin and Hannah are brother and sister who grew up in this house in the early 80s, from the time of the early 80s when they were little kids, and they inherited the house from their father who passed away in December of 2019. The home has incredible sentimental value to them as they spent decades there. They would have loved to have kept the house, but do not have the means. Additionally, as Devin works for CPS, he is required by Chicago statute to live in the city of Chicago. So they put a house on the market for sale in the spring of 2021. At that time, we were informed by the city of Evanston that the house was on a buildable and dividable lot, since it was a double lot and half the lot sat unimproved. We understood subdividing meant a long process for us, so we first tried to sell the property as one total parcel. But after several months of being on the market with no viable offer coming forward, we were approached by a woman who loves Evanston, loves the block, and wanted to build her dream home, a very green, environmentally friendly house. Her architect will be presenting next for that piece of the process, but to be clear, I'm presenting only about the subdivision of the parcel itself, as the Herricks are not doing any construction. We began this process in the fall of 2021. It's taken us several months to work with the zoning department to get guidance on acceptable lot boundaries, meet all zoning requirements, secure newly proposed surveys, and to work with the city to ensure we had full zoning approval and compliance with the newly formed lot and the subdivided parcel. We now have two separate buyers who are owner occupants under contract, one for the land piece and one for their father's home. Both buyers are very excited for the prospects of moving to Evanston and are anxious to get started to carry on their part of preserving the history of the home and block. The buyers of the house have been patiently waiting to get through the city's process since January of 2022. They're especially anxious awaiting the approval as they're moving here from Wisconsin. They actually closed on their house yesterday there, so are currently homeless as they wait the approval process. They have two high school age children, so they're hopeful we can get formal approval from City Council soon in order to move through the remaining steps, get closed on the property, have them acclimated to the area, and start the orientation process for them to be at ETHS. We're here before you asking for your approval. We feel that subdividing the property is not controversial and should be approved based on the following merits. First, we meet all the requirements of the zoning department and fall into full compliance for both lots that are being subdivided. We did not need to seek any variances, minor or major, to comply. Second, we meet all the criteria set forth in the standards outlined in section 2-8-12B of the city ordinance. Specifically, and most importantly, there are no landmarked properties impacted by the subdivision, as neither neighbor to the north or south is a landmarked property, and nor are we. Third, the subdivision actually helps preserve the district by allowing for a newly created parcel to be siphoned off from the main house, which was having trouble finding a buyer. With the proposed subdivision, our contracted buyer has come forward that will protect the history and character of the home and the district. Fourth, the newly formed lot, which is being referred to as 1210 Maple, will fit into the standards of the area and the block. As a side note, I think it's very relevant to know that the post office has no 1210 Maple on record, as presumably it is for this address, as we have an undivided lot that is deemed buildable by the city of Evanston and qualifies well for an infill development. Our proposed newly formed buildable lot is approximately 50 feet wide by 171 feet deep. The size of our two subdivided lots would fall well within the normal range of the block, with lot widths of 50 feet and 58 feet, far larger than the minimum required by statute, and preserving the block norm of around 50 feet. Fifth, the subdivision allows for improving a vacant lot that currently can be the source of unprotected soliciting into a buildable lot, offering another gorgeous home in the neighborhood, in full development as intended, and additional tax revenue for the city. To summarize, we believe we conform to all the requirements and requests asked of this commission. We know of no opposition to the subdivision, and we know of no specific issues, nor do we find any, have we heard of any reason to oppose. Additionally, we have included a couple of letters from neighbors in support. Lastly, to clarify, we're here before you only to seek the approval for the subdivision itself. The contracted buyer of the land will separately be presenting their plans, but that piece is separate. We ask that you approve the subdivision, especially with time being of the essence for our contracted buyer. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Are there any questions from commissioners?
Yes?
I just want to make sure you sign up the sheet, please, in front of you.
Oh, yes. Sure.
And for those of you that haven't gone through a subdivision, any home that is built on the new lot will obviously come to the commission regardless whether it's the home that's being presented tonight or a future home. So if there are no questions, go ahead, Beth.
Hi, I noticed that on your side of the block, then all of the lots are 54 feet wide, and your current lot, the double lot, is 108. Mm-hmm. Okay,
Sorry, I just want to give my notes.
sure. And your current double lot is 108, which could be divisible into 2 54-foot lots. Why are you not dividing them evenly so that they are the same dimension as every single other lot on that side of the block?
Yeah, there is another property at the corner that's 55 feet wide. We did that on the recommendation of the city and the zoning department to meet the requirements of impervious coverage for our current lot, and so that the existing home that was there on 1214 Maple fit into the city standards.
And Can you explain that last one?
Yeah, so if we had done them evenly, the house that sits at 1214 Maple currently, the amount of impervious surface on that lot would exceed the percentage allowed.
Yeah, I understand
city.
that one.
Oh,
What
okay.
was the second thing that you said, though? You said there was a second reason?
No, to conform to the requirements of the city. That was it.
Okay,
Yeah.
got it.
Are there any other questions by commissioners? Would one of the commissioners be willing to make, this again, would just be a recommendation to the city council, whether that be a positive or negative recommendation, citing this applicable standards of 2-8-12B with the specific? Go ahead, Aleka.
In the case of 1214 Maple, Ridge Historic District 22 Pres 0085, I recommend that the proposal for subdivision of 1214 Maple be approved. Applicable standards for this is Code Section 2-8-12B, 1, A through E, and 2.
Is there a second? Stewart seconds. All in favor signify by saying aye. Any opposed? Motion carries 8-0. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. So the next case would be 1210 Maple Avenue. Nathan Kipnis, if you would like to step to the podium, I assume you will be giving the presentation. So this is for the construction of a new two-story single-family resident and detached single-story two-car garage on the proposed subdivision for 1214 Maple Avenue.
Good evening. Before you start, make sure you sign up the sheet, please. Thank you. No.
So before I start, Cade, we'll go through that, and then I'll connect my computer. Okay. Thank you very much for having us tonight. What I'd like to do is have my client introduce herself, and then I'd like to introduce myself, and then go through what's on the screen, and then I'll show you some additional 3D work on the project.
Right, good evening. My name is Margaret Stender. I just want to take a few minutes and introduce myself to you all, express how excited I am about the opportunity to move to Evanston, and talk about what's behind this project. I grew up in Alexandria, Virginia, in an old colonial home that was built in 1780. And I moved to Chicago after graduate school in 1983 and fell in love with Chicago. With its vibrancy, its diversity, and even its messiness. I worked downtown, and I raised my two children in the DePaul neighborhood of Chicago, again in an old row house that was built in 1890. In 2000, my parents moved from Virginia to Chicago to be with us. In 2005, I had the privilege of becoming the founding CEO of the Chicago Sky, which is our city's WNBA team. And I have been working with the Sky and with girls' youth basketball for the last 16 years. My parents are gone. My children are grown up. And as my retirement approached, I started thinking about how I wanted to spend my time and with whom. Two of my dearest friends live in the North Shore area, one here in Evanston and one in Winnetka. In 2018, I joined the Evanston Bike Club, and there I discovered many energetic, kind, progressive, and engaged people. In the past 4 years, I have traveled to Evanston almost weekly, and I have come to love and respect its diversity, its progressiveness, its concern for social justice. I have met many caring and kind people in your community. So while many retire to warmer southern climates, all the arrows for me are pointing to Evanston. I met Jenny Holbert in July of 2021, and as an Evanston native, she helped me to learn your communities and search for a property. Our goal was a small, simple, open home, lots of light, beautiful yard, walkable to the lake, Whole Foods, the Purple Line, a location that hopefully I could manage for hopefully the next 20 and 30 years. And I was thrilled when we discovered the lot connected to 1214 Maple and its possibility in that beautiful neighborhood. Like many of you, I care deeply about the environment and the future of our planet, and building a right-sized, environmentally sustainable home is my small contribution, hence the Passive House certification that Nathan will share with you. I went in search of an expert in this field and discovered Nathan Kipnis right here in Evanston. His firm has been doing leading-edge work in the environmentally sustainable area for 3 decades. And for Nathan and his team, this is not a fad. This is a calling. And when I discovered that Nathan was also a member of the Evanston Bike Club, I knew that our partnership was meant to be. I have lived in 2 historic neighborhoods and hoping that this will be the 3rd. We are attempting to build a home that connects to the history, but that is also signaling that it is ready for the 21st century and beyond. And my hope is that after you hear Nathan's presentation, you will appreciate that we have taken this task very seriously and respectfully. And I'm grateful to be here tonight, and I appreciate your time.
Gonna make me cry, Margaret. I've been a member of the Evanston community for over 30 years, stretching back to the late 70s when I was a semi-professional skateboarder on the Tom Thumb skateboard team. I have been practicing architecture for over 37 years, and my firm is now in its 30th year, 29 of them in Evanston. I have also worked on quite a number of homes in the historic district. I'm thinking at least 30 at this point. Of those, I've won 8 Evanston Preservation Awards for design. I've engaged with the Preservation Commission on all these projects and always have respected the Commission's design review process. My firm works on a varied group of projects, from historic renovations, restorations, and additions that meet the strict standards for appropriateness to a wide range of other architectural styles. I've previously moved from a 1949 home that I remodeled, which won a design award, and just moved into a 1952 condo building that I'm currently renovating. A client of mine that just moved back into their renovated home in Chicago is Bonnie McDonald, the CEO of Landmarks, Illinois. Additionally, we designed Evanston's first LEED Platinum home, which is still the only one in Evanston. I'm a fellow of the American Institute of Architects, their highest membership honor. I've been on the AIA's 2030 Commitment Working Group, which helps guide the nation's 90,000 architects to design to net zero carbon levels since the working group's inception in 2009, and was the national co-chair from 2018 to 19. 2 years ago, I was asked by the AIA's national president to serve on the Committee on Climate Action and Design Excellence, the AIA's highest ranking national sustainable committee, which I'm now in my 2nd year. So what I'd like to do now is go through this slide set and then connect my computer. Frankly, I think this is the more technical stuff, and I think it'll be more informative when we see the other. But so this is the site plan. We're not asking for any zoning variances. This is all by right. It has the 5-foot setbacks. It's, centered in the space, and it's also the average of the 2 adjacent properties, so it's fitting into the neighborhood in that respect. You can see there's a detached garage that has a solar panel array. The home has a solar panel array. If you can go to the next slide, that would be great. So this is just a floor plan. I'm not going to dwell on this, but there is first floor living. I'll talk about that in a minute. So there's 1 bedroom on the first floor, a workout room that faces the backyard. Typical of many Evanston homes, there's a dining room with a view out the front. And I'll get into how the entry sequence is when we see the 3-dimensional model. If you can go to the next slide. So upstairs, there's 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms. The primary bedroom has its bed facing into the backyard, looking at the nice yard. The area on the left, you see the roof, that's the 1-story family room. So really, the 2-story part is just across the front. We can go to the next slide. That's just showing the garage. That'll have electric car charging in it. And that's just a roof plan. So that's a cross gable design, so the front of the house has the roof facing the front. Here you can see the elevation. The three-dimensional model is much more informative, but I don't want to repeat myself too much, but there is a offset entry, just like every house pretty much in the neighborhood. There's a bay that's part of the components. There's a major a major mass and a minor mass, and then a overhang for outdoor sitting in the front. You can go to the next slide. Oh, I'm sorry, go back one if you could. And then we do have that gable roof there, cross gable, that's making this house seem as big as it possibly can. It's a little house trying to be mighty on the street. And that's the side. Go to the next one. That's the south side. I'll explain that in the 3D model. On the lower left, you see a light shelf, which reflects light in and helps block direct southern sun. And then the rear elevation is the next one. If you can go to the next slide, it has a fireplace. It's that square in the middle on the bottom. We have an electric fireplace, and it's not like what you've seen before. It's a steam fireplace that's illuminated with LEDs. It's a zero carbon fireplace. It looks unbelievably real. If you can go to the next one, that's just the garage. Similar roof shape that the main house has. Go to the next one. So these are some of the perspective views. You can see the composition, which I'm going to explain more with when I have the 3D model running, but you can see the way the mass is. There's the big and the smaller one off to the left, and the entry with its overhang, and then the bay. Go to the next slide. That's the rear view, just to see the roof's align from the family room to the garage, kind of in a straight, the ridge lines align. Go to the next slide. And then, so these are the two homes. The one on the right is the one that was just previous to us coming up here. That's 1214 Maple. And then you can see the one to the left is 1208 Maple. That one is stucco. The homes, and you'll see when I go through this again, but the homes all have porches and bays, and there's a certain proportion to the windows and the way the roofs are set up. If you go to the next slide. So this is directly across the street. There's a 5-unit townhouse, which is really quite nice. I know there's a couple of those. I don't know if they're from the same architect. Maybe Stuart Cohn knows that. But throughout the district, there's a couple of these that really look neat. And if you go to the next slide. So this is the proportioning slide. So what we're trying to do, when we do a modern home, there's a lot of ways you can do it, and one of them is you can have a flat roof, and you can have horizontal windows, and that would be out of character here. So we wanted to have a roof that came up. We wanted to have windows that were a certain height to width proportion. We wanted to have the massing have similar proportions to other massing. There's no question this looks different, but what we're trying to do is make it relate in a number of different ways from a design standpoint, and not just kind of flinging this into the neighborhood, but really trying to pay attention to the different components. Go to the next slide. This is a slide about the trees. They are unfortunately not in very good shape at all 4 of them. We have a very robust landscape plan that is going to do the neighborhood proud and do the house proud as well. Unfortunately, we had Oregon Urban Forestry come out to see if they could take some of the wood and reuse it. It's something that we've done on a number of projects. These are just not good trees. They really couldn't do anything with them, which is really unfortunate. That's that. So I'm going to go, and I think that's the last slide. So it'll take 1 second to. you need glasses at some point. Okay. All right. So, okay. All right, we're gonna do. Is that connected down there? Oh, boy. What is it? The one from the laptop? All right, just let me try it now. Wow. I'll just restart it. It'll be all right. It's not connected right now. Just connect it. I'll be there in a second. Okay. Yep. Well, I am not going to start this program. I'll just show the slides individually. So I was asked today to go over and show some of the homes in the neighborhood. And so this is kind of walking down the block. Hope everyone can see that. So these are excellent examples of historic homes, no question about it. These are great homes, and there's a wide range of styles. And I'm going to point out just a few things. There are a few of them that are stucco. This one at 1202. I believe the one at 1208, our neighbor. The one at 1202 does not have any significant roof form facing forward, nor does 1208. If I look at the other ones, 1236 is an Italianate building that has a hip roof around it. And the other one that I would point out in this group is, there's one more stucco. I think it's this one at 1203 Maple. This last one, I just want to point out, I saw it this morning. This is not in the on the block. It's at 1202 Wesley. But this shows what happens when you have a handicap ramp that needs to go to a building with 6 or 7 or 8 steps. And, you know, with Margaret, one of her concerns is aging in place. So that's one of the rationales for the way the building is set. These other slides, this one shows 1801 Wesley, which is also in the Ridge Historic District. Very modern building. It won an Evanston Preservation Award in 2010 and also won a Design Evanston Award in 2010. The building at 1331 Asbury, also in the Ridge Historic District, beautiful building, won a 2016 Evanston Preservation Award and was featured in Architect Magazine. This one also has a cross gable, or, perpendicular gable roof to the front and is white stucco. And then this is the building that we have. Now I am going to see if I can get this to work. Yep, good. Okay, so while this is coming up, I would like to just talk about this project in specific. I completely respect the concepts of the Evanston Historic District. The district, to me and Margaret, is an authentic collection of homes that represent all 17 decades of Evanston's development. Let me just zoom this in. What makes the district so great are their wide variety of home styles that represent the times in which they were designed. I can imagine them when a new style came along, such as the prairie homes maybe in the 1910s, the owners of previously established styles very likely raised concerns about how the new designs would fit into the area. But at the end of the day, when you walk through the historic district, it is the wide variety of great examples of home styles that make it so interesting. This is why when additions and renovations are proposed in the historic district, per Section 15 of the standards for review, there is in fact a very high standard for them to tightly integrate with the original design of the house. However, what happens when a new home is proposed, as is in this case? Let's be clear, this only happens very rarely, such as when there's a vacant lot, which is, I don't even know if there are any others. A home is destroyed, maybe by fire, or a home is clearly beyond repair or renovation, which is a very tough standard. So it's a very, very infrequent event in the district. In this case, at 1210 Maple, there's a vacant lot for a new home. As such, the choice is to make the home true to its time or to design a home that pretends to be from a different time period. That's what they do at Disney World, and is completely at odds with the notion that the district is a collection of authentic home styles. If this home is not to be of a current style, what style of home should it be? A Queen Anne, a colonial, a Richardsonian home? None of these make sense. When people walk through the district, they should not be misled by a design pretending to be from another time period. Instead, what we wanted to do in this site, in this time and for this client, is design a home that represents and responds to the needs of the client and society, a home designed to the highest level of sustainability and at the same time one that relates to its context. If this were simply a modern home, it could easily have had a flat roof with horizontal ribbon windows. When we designed the house, we very carefully considered the context of the adjacent homes and tried to see how we could relate to them while still expressing this design. We had to balance this with the fact that if we related every architectural element to the existing homes, we'd be copying them. It is much more appropriate to have distinctly expressed architectural styles. There are several common denominators that we took into account between the home and its neighbors. The front setback of the house is aligned with the adjacent homes. This provides continuity with the urban fabric, which the current vacant lot is obviously missing. The home also fits into its context, even though it is a smaller home at about 3,000 square feet. This was achieved by making the house an L with its broad two-story side facing the front. The other leg of the house is only one story and runs along the north side of the site to allow for more direct solar gain into the house, as well as to take advantage of making a better location for the PV array. There is a light shelf, which is this piece here, along the south wall of the one-story section that not only shades the building from the direct summer sun, but reflects sunlight deep into the space for natural daylighting. We designed a sloped roof on the house in lieu of a flat roof, not only, whoops, we disappeared there. In lieu of a flat roof, to not only relate to the neighbors' sloped roofs and heights of the buildings, but also to allow for those two integrated solar panels. There's one on the main house and one on the garage. The roof helped the home have a similar height as others in the area have. Also, the roof height is within a foot of the maximum allowed by the current zoning ordinance. Interestingly, most of the existing homes in the district are over the maximum roof height currently allowed by zoning, so we cannot exactly match them anyway. The reason that the house is not raised up with as many stairs as is common in the area is this home doesn't have a basement, number one. This was done for a number of reasons. One is that Margaret didn't want or need a basement, and also we didn't want to have the additional conditioned space in the basement for no reason. Digging down for a basement would use more concrete than would be necessary. Concrete is one of the materials with the highest CO2 impact. Additionally, it helps with the concept of aging in place, which makes the first floor more accessible, as the entire first floor has wider hallways and doors along with the first floor bedroom. If a ramp were ever needed, it could easily be integrated into the landscape. We offset the entry, as nearly all the homes in the district have, and integrated a bay window system in the front. We provided a covered porch area to allow for outdoor seating area at the front of the house to be able to, or let Margaret watch the neighbors walk by and have interactions with them. By having the porch set closer to the ground, it'll hopefully be even more inviting. The house also has a projecting front overhang as a design element, which is this piece right here. That demarks the two masses, the major mass compared to the minor, and also provides some shading from the south into this large window area and a smaller amount of shading for the east sun. We carefully looked at the proportions of the windows, as I noted before. In this case, the windows are casement windows, which are by far more efficient than double-hung windows due to their full perimeter seal, kind of like a refrigerator door, and are also triple glazed. It is on target to be Evanston's first certified passive house. This standard requires that the home be incredibly tightly constructed, essentially 10 times tighter than existing homes. Most existing homes have 7 to 10 air changes per hour. This one will have 0.6. So it's about 12 times more efficient from that standpoint. So we need every way to do that, to make that happen. This home will be all electric, meaning there isn't a gas line coming in, so therefore no on-site CO2 emissions. All of the appliances will be high-performance heat pump systems along with an induction cooktop. The HVAC system will be an electric heat pump, and there will be electric car charging and a battery backup system connected to the PV system. We are homing in on it being fully net zero. We're having meetings right now trying to whittle that down. I think we have that, meaning it will generate as much or more electricity than it uses on an annual basis. The American Institute of Architects has recently adopted the Framework for Design Excellence, a more integrated way to understand what makes good design. Its core message is that architecture is not just about how something looks, but also about how it responds to concepts such as sustainability, wellness, and resilience. Essentially, buildings must perform and address these concepts, and there's a certain rigor to doing these items, especially from a third-party certification level, such as Passive House, which is the highest level of sustainable certification. I know that section 16 of the standard is one of the key aspects of this design review. I'd like to quote it for reference. In considering new construction such as a new freestanding structure, the Commission shall not impose a requirement for the use of a single architectural style or period, though it may impose a requirement for compatibility. Margaret and I want to carefully listen to the comments that will be raised. My hope is that my presentation has demonstrated that the home's design positively addresses the relevant aspects of the standards for review of applications for certification of appropriateness. I'd be happy to go over any of these relevant sections in more detail with the Commission. We want to help enhance the integrity of the historic neighborhood with this project. Our goal is to make a great home for Margaret, for the neighborhood, for Evanston, and beyond. Thank you.
Thank you. So why don't we go straight into Commissioner questions? Mark?
Okay. So, I mean, I love the design, and, you know, clearly your client's entitled to build a house here, and a modern house. I mean, I think you kind of ended up really where we start, which is, you know, clearly the ordinance allows new construction, it allows innovative modern designs. And we do, you know, every year we have you know, having been in the Commission for almost 6 years, we've, you know, approved probably 30 or so new homes. So it's clearly something we do. And when we revised the ordinance a few years ago, we kind of brought emphasis to these sections to say you can do this. So that's not something, I mean, I know some of the public comment was you shouldn't do new construction, but clearly the ordinance permits that. What we're required to do, though, is not to abstractly say, we love the design, which, personally I do, but what we're obligated to do, and we're obligated really to stick to, is to assess the standards in the ordinance. And I don't know if you're prepared to do this today, but generally speaking, the argument that is made before the commission, and I do think some of the public comment has done this, is to stick to the ordinance. And I think the first, let's say, 11 standards clearly all go to an assessment of the visual relationship, architectural relationship between this and the neighboring houses. And you've slightly touched on it, but generally what we're used to seeing is people go through, there's clearly some repetition that you're not going to repeat everything for every standard, but clearly what we're used to is people taking us through at least, say, those 11 standards and, making the case of why, despite the fact it's modern, it's not, going to ever be the same house by any means as those houses, why there's, a compatibility and some degree of relationship, which may be a very innovative kind of degree. And clearly you touched on it. I don't know if you're prepared to really, at some point you're going to have to take us through the standards and present it.
Happy to do that. I've got them.
Okay, because I didn't see it in the materials either, so I don't know if you have a written presentation or.
I do. I can PDF this to the commission, but I can also just read through it.
I don't know what the best, I'll leave it to you guys. I'm surprised it wasn't in the materials.
I think if you'd like to read through it and enter it in the record that way, the public record would probably be the most appropriate.
Sure. Section 1 is on height, and I touched on that. This is essentially as tall as we can build, and we're trying architecturally to make it seem even taller than it is. So I feel that meets that standard. The proportion of the facades, which is compatible with the property structures adjacent to it. So I went over the
Is that on? Oh, sorry. Nate, your presentation sort of just suggests what the adjacent houses look like, and we have photographs of them. But to really make that judgment, and I emailed Cade to this effect, what I want to see is either a drawing or collage that shows the facade of your house with the two immediately adjacent houses, or even with more of the street. Because for you to say that it meets the proportions of the other facades isn't demonstrated in any of your materials. So, I can't make that judgment based on the materials that you've submitted.
Should I continue, or is that? Please. Yeah, okay. I do think this lines up as good as we could get it when, again, the houses that are there aren't rebuildable. Like, we couldn't make it as tall as these other ones. We are trying to line up certain things as best we can. We're not trying to copy these, but we are trying to set different datum points for that. The proportion of openings, I went over that in that proportioning study. So the relationship of the width to height of the windows and doors, that was in that proportion study. The rhythm of solids and voids in the facade, I think if you look at every one of those homes that we referenced, I'm sorry.
Can I just quickly ask, you showed the proportionality of the window openings for the row homes across the street, but it would be helpful to also see the proportionality of window openings for either the houses on either side of the new.
So
yeah. Can I make a comment, because you're talking about proportion of solids to voids? I think that proportion and what we perceive from the street is created largely by the presence of porches. And in the absence of a porch, and I actually find the canopy over the the rather exposed French doors out from the bedroom, to label that porch is disingenuous. And I'm wondering, because all of these houses that do have porches that extend across the whole front, that one of the ways you could have established a sympathetic relationship to the adjacent houses was to have run that canopy, and I'm not asking for classical columns holding it up, obviously, but to have run a canopy or an element across at close to or similar level to the other porches.
Understood. What I was trying to get to is, if I look at each of those styles of the houses there's varying amounts of openings, there's varying amounts of covered things. So should our design be in the middle of that? Can it be to a range?
What are the elements that I want to say something first here, because first of all, I think it's a very good presentation. I think Mark's comments to you, which is all of the things that you've done which are innovative, which you are literally well known and if not famous for in the city of Chicago, have absolutely nothing to do with the question of what it means to make a house which is in sympathy with the street or the adjacent houses. And I applaud you. This is a very nice house. I feel like it could be anywhere, probably better on a street where it isn't as closely adjacent to other houses. But as an innovative designer, I don't think you've taken on the challenge of how you make a house in a modern idiom and look for elements that could potentially have a sympathetic relationship to adjacent houses. I think the suggestion of a canopy with a porch is one. The little canopy calling out the front door, I mean, maybe you have a small cross gable on the upper roof that centers on that door and makes it prominent. So whereas the L, and I'm not sure, that's also acting as sunscreening. Is
Right.
that correct?
Yes.
But sunscreening for the bays.
Right.
I mean, I think there's certainly other ways to accomplish that. But what the question, or the really very difficult design challenge that I don't see addressed here, Nate, is how do you do a contemporary or a modern style or modern idiom house in relation that actually has a understandable, visually perceivable relationship to the things around it. I mean, I understand and applaud the degree to which the houses you do, and this house is technologically advanced. I think that, like Mark said, none of us would, we're not being asked to judge that, and we applaud that you have dedicated your career to making houses of that type. But again, the question is, and the profound challenge here is, how do you make a house that has some visual relationship to the other houses while still being modern or contemporary, or whatever word you want to use to describe it? And I think that that's an important question, because right now, all of our streets have this variety of houses in terms of styles, as you pointed out, and certainly the ordinance and all of us, I think, are more than happy to look at yet another stylistic or language or idiom variation on what kind of a house you could build here. Nobody's arguing with that. We're just arguing and I don't know if my other board members or commission members agree with me, but I am not convinced by any of your presentation about a visual relationship between the formal character, not the stylistic character, but the dominant elements of almost all the houses on that street.
Yeah, I would agree. I see it, it's a phenomenal design, and, I love the house, but in our rule, and I have no problems with putting something really innovative and modern, in the context of that neighborhood. I think that's great. I think that's, what should be done, and as you said, we're not supposed to be recreating something that's already there. So I don't want, like Stuart's comments or my comments to be misinterpreted as, you can't do anything like this. I think that you haven't taken on some of the very difficult challenges of, the character, some calling out in a modern way, some little tips of the hat to the block, a little more, I'm not finishing my sentence well, but.
Yeah, no, I appreciate the comments, and I didn't come here tonight expecting everyone to nod their head and go, sure. I mean, I kind of got a little heads up on the internet. I'm going to just continue through the standards if I can. And so the rhythm of spacing and structures on the street, and so that's goes to the positioning of the building, and it's an average of the setback. And it is wider. You see this gap here. That was, as mentioned before, the width of that lot is larger than others. But typically, each one has a 5-foot setback, and that's true on the south side. The rhythm of entrance, porches, and other projections, I felt that by incorporating a bay, an offset entry, and breaking up the front mass of the house, that we were looking to do that. And again, this is a small home, and we're trying really hard to make it fit in. Obviously, we wouldn't put the one-story part in the front, but the notion that this house seems to have the same mass as others on the block, and then is broken down with the bay and the offset front entry and overhangs. Comments from Stuart duly noted. The relationship of materials and texture. So this is real stucco. I really like using that, lime-based stucco. It would not be a stark white. This is a slightly off color, slightly off white. So there's many homes in the historic district that have stucco, and then the roof is a standing seam metal roof, which is very, very durable, made from recycled materials and is recyclable later. The roof shape and roof-mounted equipment, there's no roof-mounted equipment, but the roof shape, I mentioned when I was presenting that there are a number of homes on the block that do not have dormers or gable ends facing the street. So this was, and that other example I showed at 1331 Asbury had a very similar roof to this as well. That's the modern house. Wall of continuity. Facades and property and structures shall, when it is a characteristic of the area, form cohesive walls of enclosure along the street. So,
Nate, your renderings seem to show the main facade of the house set a number of feet behind the two adjacent structures, and because your site plan doesn't actually show the adjacent structures, I wonder, did you try to produce an alignment, which is what I think number 9 refers to?
we took the average of the one to the south and the one to the north, so it's right in between there.
Well, how do you interpret walls of continuity?
So like the primary walls, this one, the one to the south is just very slightly in front, and the one to the north is just slightly behind, or it should be behind.
Even though the porches come about 8 or 9 feet forward of that.
Yeah.
Okay.
So this porch, I mean, yes, we could certainly move that porch out, and we could look at some other aspects to get that more compatible. The scale of the structure, and I've mentioned this a number of times, that we've got this 2-story mass in the front, even though it's a very small building relative to the others. The directional expression of the facade, this is not a dead symmetrical facade. It has some movement because of the way these pieces intersect and overlap. Number 14, innovative design. I think I've talked enough about that. And number 16 is the new construction aspect.
Could you explain, we understand how this house is extraordinarily innovative technically, but can you point out to us what you think is innovative about the visual appearance of the house or its elements?
I don't think I've ever seen a house like this.
You showed us two pictures of very nice ones that received Evanston awards.
Similar, but not exactly like this.
Well, no two houses are exactly alike.
Right.
Unless you're copying or reusing a floor plan.
Right. I don't know if this counts or not, but this light shelf is a very innovative design feature. This is, again, to block direct southern sun from coming in, and then some of the sun bounces off of here, even on the coming summer solstice. And then
Frank Lloyd Wright Usonian houses have that feature.
I think even Frank Lloyd Wright didn't invent houses. So, I don't know that this
Well,
is...
he certainly claimed to, and I hope you're not doing the same
No,
tonight.
no, I did watch The Fountainhead, though, before I came here, but no, I didn't. I am not claiming that. No, I think the interesting thing is there's a lot of architects that do beautiful homes that don't perform, and there's a lot of people that do high-performance homes that are terrible looking. And so what this is what we call high design, low carbon, that this is a really good combination of those, trying really hard to take into account all sorts of things, including the context, including what needs to be done for the 21st century.
Nate, I certainly agree with you, but I would go back to Mark's opening comments about its relationship to the rest of the houses on the street.
Okay, I'm done with the standards. If there-
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions specific to the design by commissioners? Go ahead, John.
Nate, the roof pitches on the garage in the back of the house, is that, and the asymmetrical size of it, is that to maximize the solar energy on the panels?
Yes, exactly. That's to extend this is offset, and it's at a different angle so that we get more solar panels on that roof.
And if the roof pitch was symmetrical and steeper so that it was the same height, does that steep angle also minimize the electrical energy?
So there's a couple things at play. So one is, what's the optimal angle for this? What's the module of the panels and things like that. So this just, when we were working on it, this made the most sense. It made the most sense to push these masses to the north, so we got better access, less blocking from adjacent trees down the line and things like that.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions? No? Nate, why don't you take a seat, please, and then we're going to switch over to public comment. So, Kay, do you want to?
Should I disconnect this, or should I leave it on? Or?
No, I think leave it on for now.
The first member signed up is a Mr. John Toussaint.
John Toussaint, 1222 houses north of the lot. And I object to this design because it doesn't harmonize with the neighboring houses. My daughter, who grew up on the block, is an architect with a specialty on preservation, and she wrote a letter to the commission in which she detailed all our objections to the design. I also know about 3 other people who object to the design who couldn't come to this meeting. I think some of them also wrote letters to the commission. We are in the Ridge Historic District. I am not allowed to change my house precisely to preserve the features that it shares with other houses on the block. Out of 20 houses, 16 have porches, and that's just one thing I want to mention. I am sure that the architect is clever enough to come up with a modern design that is going to more harmonize with the neighboring houses.
Thank you.
Mr. Peter Segal?
Good evening. I live across the street from the site, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time because I think you've all said many of the things that I would say, but I would just suggest that the design falls short of the standard of appropriateness in this case. For this particular site on this particular block, as has been pointed out, yes, it is a modern house, and that's fine. There's nothing at all wrong with that. But it is a protected historic district, and there's a reason that this design is before this commission to evaluate whether or not it is appropriate, and I suggest that it isn't. I'll offer a couple of points. Clearly with one exception on the block on both sides of the street, every house, the ground floor, main floor, is about 4 to 6 feet above grade. And, that I understand in this case why that is a challenge. But nonetheless, that datum is part of that, appropriateness. And the lacking of a porch, again, with almost every house on the street having a gracious stair going up to that level with a large covered porch in the front. Again, you don't have to replicate that, but it's just missing. It's going to stand out rather dramatically, and I think that's what we're hoping to avoid. I think the other thing I'll mention is that I understand some of the issues with the roof, but the fact is that it does stand out as a contemporary design, where roofs are sort of simplified and idealized, and this roof sort of does that, and it doesn't have the character, and both the pitch and the form of the lines of the roof are really not sympathetic at all to any of the homes on the block. And then the final note I'll make is I understand how there was a study done that looked at the proportions of window openings and solids to voids, which is, I understand, but there's a significant element or a flaw in that study that was part of the packet, where there was a line suggesting that the main body of the house, the proportions of that were consistent with the other homes in the block. And if you notice where the lower right-hand corner of that diagonal line indicating that proportion, on the adjacent houses, that line terminates about 5 or 6 feet in the air, where on this house it terminates pretty much at the ground. And I think that to suggest that proportion is somehow aligned or sympathetic to the neighborhood is erroneous. So I would suggest to the commission that you ask that the design be tweaked to attempt to fit in better. So, thank you.
Thank you.
L.J. Alul?
Hello, good evening, everyone. Thank you for having me, and thank you for your attention and consideration of my comments. I would ask the commission to oppose this design as it is. It does not fit into the neighborhood, as many other people have stated. And as you can see from the picture, if you stand on the street and look at the lot and try to imagine the rendering and see the two houses that are on either side of it, you'll know that it'll definitely stick out like a sore thumb on the street. I live across the street in one of the row houses. They're not townhouses, they're row houses. They're built in the 1890s. I've lived there for 17 years, and my bay window looks at the site, which for many years has been a lovely little tree spot across the street. I don't want to have to look out my window and see a contemporary home that is obviously contrary to the design of every other home on the block. While I'd be happy to welcome a new neighbor anytime onto our block, I would appreciate if the house that was being built didn't stick out like a sore thumb to make the rest of our homes appear to be out of place. It shows a lot of disregard and disrespect for the other homeowners who have lived in their home for at least a decade. We have all had to maintain our homes under strict standards, some of us at great expense. And I do not appreciate somebody coming into the neighborhood building or asking to build a home, regardless of how innovative inside it might be, that doesn't look like it fits in the rest of the neighborhood. You will have in your packets other letters from my neighbors, many of whom were unable to attend because, like the rest of us, we got our little postcard about 6 days ago. And so we're unable to make changes to our plans in order to come. So I hope that you'll read those letters and understand that not many people like the design at all, and we would appreciate a redesign, including porches and other elements that some of the people have mentioned, window size. For myself, I don't see any drainage. Where are the gutters on this house? Are there any downspouts? Where's the water going to go when it rains? The roofs, the asymmetry of the roof is definitely out of place. The comparison, I think it was slide number 73, to the row houses across the street, that made me laugh out loud, actually, because it didn't really make much sense. But anyway, I hope that you'll take that into consideration. Please oppose this design, and please ask them to resubmit something that actually does blend in with the rest of the neighborhood. I'm sure that you can do it. If you're that talented, I'm sure you can come up with something. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ginny Holland? Holbert, I'm sorry.
Hi, I'm Ginny Holbert. I am actually the real estate agent, and I have represented Margaret. So I think both Nathan and Margaret really addressed most of the points that I would make, and it's not my area of expertise. I would just like to note that just as a point of interest, I lived on the block for about 15 or 20 years, and I no longer live there. But I'm very familiar with each one of the homes and the block itself. But I think I would like to put it in the overall context of the housing market and the housing stock in Evanston. And I work with many, many downsizer clients, varying income levels, but that's who I am. I mean, that's my age group, and that's what a lot of people are in Evanston. And they're almost trapped in these beautiful old homes that do not serve them very well at all. And, you know, Margaret's one house that is on one level is not going to solve that problem, but from a real estate point of view, I would love to see more design and more creative thinking about how we are going to provide for a very diverse population in Evanston. I don't mean only racially diverse or economically diverse. I mean the diversity of age. And, you know, I support Margaret's home. I support this design. I think that's probably fairly irrelevant to you because I'm the real estate agent. But I do think that I appreciate the difficulty of this commission, because to say something, if something is compatible, is a pretty nebulous standard. And it does not mean that it has to be, it doesn't necessarily mean like the other homes. This will be very different. So I think that the architect has taken the idea of compatibility very, very seriously. I don't think it's been disrespectful or discounted. I know that they both have worked very hard on this. But again, the idea of compatibility is pretty different. And I mean, that's your task to define that and to know it when you see it. But compatible doesn't mean it looks like the other homes. You know, we've heard from a number of people, well, I don't mind a new home. I don't mind a contemporary home. But what really does that mean? Are any elements that strike people, the neighbors, for example, that strike neighbors as contemporary, are they really going to accept those? I don't know, but again, that's for the commission to discuss and decide. But I will, I just would like to emphasize that this idea of trying to be compatible with a very beautiful block that I loved and I lived on for many years was taken very seriously. So thank you.
Thank you.
If anyone else would like to speak, I would ask that you come up one by one and then sign in on the sign-in sheet in front. I don't have anyone else signed up.
So, Nate, do you have any other comments related to that you've heard, or would you prefer that we just go into deliberation?
Just real briefly, probably just 2 points. So I know that there's been some comments about the precedent that this would set for additions and renovations, and I know that has nothing, zero to do with this. This is a totally separate thing. A condition like this comes up very rarely in any of the historic districts. The other thing is, I believe in the process here. I've been part of this for 30 years. I hear this stuff. I see stuff in the paper. Lose a few hours of sleep over it. But at the end of the day, whatever you guys would like will be delivered. And and making me happy, making my client happy. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so I think it's very important for us to be very clear about the standards and our thoughts on that. So just in summary, I know from hearing all of your comments and hearing some of the public comment and things that Nate and Margaret have said, I know that Standard 6, which is the rhythm of entrance porches, has been noted several times. And I know, Stuart, you mentioned it specifically. I know you also mentioned the walls of continuity, which is Standard 9. And I believe you're saying Standard 4 for rhythm of solids to voids. Just so that we discuss as a whole, are there any other standards that commissioners would like to discuss? Well, I mean, 16, I think, why don't you go ahead and...
I think, as I read it, Standard 16 has kind of two sections to it. It says that the commission is not required, is not allowed to impose a style, which I get. But then there's this other part after the comma, though it may impose a requirement for compatibility. And I think that compatibility part needs to be discussed, possibly. So,
go ahead.
And if I may follow on that, and I think that's what refers then to Standard 14, where it actually kind of fleshes out what compatibility they're looking for, which is the last part of the sentence: such design is compatible with the size, scale, color, material, and character of the property, neighborhood, or environment. So there's not only that that requirement to show at least to demonstrate the thought that went into the new design and how that it reflects the compatibility, but it as well as the standards above that you've already mentioned.
Yeah, the conversation of whether it's even considered an innovative design, I think, is a separate item. Regardless, I think the project still needs to meet the standards 1 through 11. So sure. I think that is, go ahead, Stuart.
I was just going to say that I don't feel like I have enough information to make a judgment about standard number 2, although some of the later material that Nate showed seemed to have an elevation drawing of the house immediately to the right. So, if I don't know where this is going to go, but I would love to see that drawing with the other adjacent house to be able to say whether it relates in proportion, which is what standard 2 is, or not.
I think that's a good point. I think one thing I'd like to say is that there's obviously a lot of things about this design that are highly commendable. and I think that could be considered highly innovative and important and necessary for the world that we live in, and that this location in such a significant block might be very deserving of such a home. I think what the commission is here to do is to react to what you proposed. It's not to offer design solutions. It's not to design this for you. So I think as we offer standards that are of concern, that's very important. I think also what maybe Stuart is talking about is if there's further documentation that you could provide that could aid in the commission's assessment of this project, I would encourage the commissioners to discuss that as well.
Go ahead, Mark.
Okay. I had a few related points that do relate to that. So first of all, just as background, I mean, often for new homes like this can be very challenging. And it's more often than not, it takes multiple, revisions are made and the applicant comes back and then the home is approved. And certainly, I think I didn't hear anybody who was against you building a house here or a modern house or new construction. And certainly those of us in the commission, want to see you succeed. In terms of the, this kind of engagement with the standards, I think that while, yes, it would be, it would have been a lot more helpful for you to focus on and engage with the standards and to actually, typically applicants doing something like this show us, much more analytical data about the exact relationship with the neighboring homes than you did. And that's going to be a necessity. But I'm afraid because perhaps you weren't thinking that way in the process, I'm not sure the design is going to get approval without some modifications. And I think that those two just totally go together, is that process of looking at the standards, looking at what meets the standards and what's different than the standards, assessing that, and then, what that means for the design. You once in a while touch the neighborhood houses, but just as often you were touching on, for example, using as a principal argument, similar, very modern homes, like on Wesley and Ridge. And, I went and walked the block today because, you need to see the real estate to understand it. And this is really one of the most, unique blocks in Evanston. I mean, there are extraordinary homes on this block that are actually, there are only a few blocks like this in Evanston with this kind of collection of homes. And those blocks over Wesley and Asbury, there are a fair number of new and modern homes that relate much better to those. And I think you have to engage with, again, the neighboring homes and this site. And I think it makes it a lot more challenging. I'm not an architect and I can't even imagine how, one could surmount these challenges. But I do think this block is particularly challenging to design a house that fits on. And I think it's this block, it's the neighboring houses that are really one of the most fabulous blocks in Evanston. And you have to accept that that's the case and work with it. I think finally in doing that, I just want to say, you hear lots of opinions from commissioners, from people in the audience. And the standards, we rewrote that innovation standard. I think Carlos and I are probably the only people here who worked on it. I don't know if Susie was in the commission yet. But we definitely wanted applicants to be able to build modern, innovative houses that in some ways were very different than the surrounding houses. We wanted that's what it is about. And I think, I think I probably wrote those words, innovative design, with Julie Hecker. And we definitely meant houses like this, 100%. But the compatibility, people are saying, well, it needs a porch, it needs this elevation. I think it needs some compatibility. It needs to pay some homage to the houses. But I think as Commissioner Reinhold just said, it's totally up to you how to do that. You don't need to satisfy every objection. You don't need to say this person wanted this, therefore I'm going to do it. But I think that, again, the challenge is yours to come up with a way of paying homage to the houses while doing your very innovative design. And that probably inherently means in some ways you're going to find relationships to these features of these houses. In some ways you're not. And I think, again, it's up to you to present a design, not to us to design it. And I think it's going to, with this block and the challenges, it's going to take all your skills to come up with a way to do, that beautiful home in a way that has that compatibility with the block, and that, hopefully we can approve.
So that we're clear to Nate, I think we've gone through the standards that people have problems with. Although John pointed out the asymmetrical roofs on the back, I'm fine with those, knowing that in fact they're canted to maximize the exposure on the solar panels. So for me, and I would love to know if my fellow commissioners agree with me, I think we should ask Nate to really just address the front of this house unless everybody feels differently. I think the back of the house and the one-story portion are all very nicely done.
Yeah, I was actually going to say, when I was walking the neighborhood and looking at the site, I thought one of the challenges you also had was that Larimer Park is behind you. And so, as a district, you're dealing with, primary visual view sheds, and you have a big one behind you too. And when I looked at the design, I thought, oh, it's one characteristic of the neighborhood. Like I was almost going to add standard number 6, the roof shapes, but it's not necessarily matching the exact roof shape. It's more that there's so much dimensionality to all these houses on your block. And you keep saying, we want to be a big house, even though we don't want a lot of space. We have a little house right across the street from you, right next to the row houses, that fits in and has a porch also. And but the back, I thought, had some kind of cool creative things going on that did match some of the dimensionality that you see when you look around other houses in the back too from Larimer. I know this, and I also wanted to say, I know this process is like you've worked so hard to get this far, and Nate's very familiar with it. I know as an owner, it's like, it's such a difficult process to sit here and hear all these things that aren't intended to be criticisms. It's a really cool design, and I know we're going to get there. And I'm really appreciative of what you're doing in bringing something like this to the neighborhood. But I did like some of the cool dimensionality of the back almost better than the front. So for what that's worth.
Any other comments by commissioners?
I do want to second Stuart's feelings about focusing on the front facade. I don't object to the asymmetrical roof, especially knowing the rationale behind it on the rear. I also want to reiterate what many of the opinions have been here regarding the porch structure. So for me, it's standard 6 is probably my main objection. Rhythm of entrance porches, and I want to get even more specific. When I look at the facade, I see what feels like 3 separate porch elements, and that's where the rhythm seems to be incompatible with the remainder of the homes on the streetscape. Whereas some porches might have 1 or 2 different architectural elements to them that still feels like one porch. This feels like 3 separate porches. And I'm not sure one porch is the answer here on this house.
Okay, so I would like to ask you if you would be willing to continue the case and then come back. I just want to ask before I make the assumption, of course.
Absolutely. I mentioned, I've been through this a lot, maybe not to this kind of microscope, but I certainly know at the end of the day, we're all going to be happy with it. So I've listened very carefully, and, there's been some stuff, not necessarily from the board, but from the commission, but that I understand, something is parachuting in. I mentioned in my presentation that, the district has 17 decades of stuff. Now, granted, this is compressed into maybe 6 or 7 decades, but still, when that newer one popped in, those crazy craftsmen or whatever, I'm sure there was an uproar. So, but we'll get through it, and I want to make something that you guys are proud of, and most importantly, Margaret is, and the neighbors. I mean, at the end of the day, Margaret's going to be there amongst the neighbors. I want everyone to be happy about it. So, again, I've been listening very carefully, and I'll work very hard to do that.
Thank you. And I think the commission wants to see you succeed, and this would be a great asset to Evanston on many levels. To summarize just for you, Nate, so that you have it, I think there's a strong comments towards the standard 6, which is the rhythm of the entrance porches, and the other projections. Other standards are the proportion of facades, which is standard 2, standard 4, which is the rhythm of solids to voids. There was comment on standard 8, which is the roof shapes and possibly the depth of the roof. And then the standard 9, which is walls of continuity. I think, too, if there can be any documentation put into the presentation to help us understand how these standards are met in relation to the adjacent homes primarily, and then possibly the rest of the block, I think that would help us all understand much better about your intentions on that. So with that, is there a commissioner that would be willing to continue this case? And then what is our next date? July 12th meeting? Someone like to make a motion?
Excuse me, before we do that, Nate, do you have enough time to prepare revisions for the next meeting, July 12th? So there will be, at least 10 days before.
We are not meeting in August, just so you know.
There's some flexibility in the submission. It's not the submission deadline that is for a new application. We'll provide some flexibility for you.
And I'd like to reiterate that I think we are all strongly just looking for the front facade, which hopefully that helps. Okay, so would a commissioner like to make a motion to continue to, thank you, Jane.
I move that we move case 22 Press 0081 for 1210 Maple Avenue in the Ridge Historic District to our next meeting, July 12th.
Is there a second? Stewart seconds. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 8-0. Thank you both. So our next case is 650 Forest Avenue in the Lakeshore Historic District. Gary, if you'd like to step to the podium, this is for the demolition of an existing two-story rear addition, construction of a new two-story addition, and open wood deck at the rear volume, and replacement of the existing front porch windows.
Good evening. Gary Shoemaker. I'm with Shoemaker Design Associates. I'm here to present information on with regard to the project at 650 Forest Avenue. Batteries tonight?
Are you looking for the pointer?
You do this
There's
just
two of
for me,
them.
don't you?
It's the top. Gary is the. There you go.
There's one. All right. Okay. This is a Craftsman house. Our proposal here is to remove these existing non-original screen windows. These were done thoughtfully by a previous owner, but it's a handyman kind of project. There are some single pane glass windows behind there. We propose taking these all out, reconstructing them with the same proportion and fenestration, but using an engineered and a more permanent solution that would allow us to interchange those windows, making that a proper 3 seasons porch for the owner to enjoy. You see some existing conditions images at the back of the house. This was an addition that was probably late 80s, early 90s maybe, which was a small bay window and a kitchen and a small extension to a bedroom. We'll be removing all of this from the back of the house and constructing a new 2-story addition with a mudroom off to the side and a larger porch off the rear of the house. If you give me the next slide, there we go. From the site plan, you can see this is that existing porch and bay that we'll be removing. The bedroom addition is squared just above that bay, so you can see the extent of that here. Our new addition is here with a porch and a deck here and an extension of a patio here. You can see that its introduction into the rear yard is similar to the space that they had in the back. This is all fully zoning compliant. If you give me the next slide, please. The roof plan, to give you an example, an idea of how we've structured this, we've used a truncated hip on the back of the house, which is similar to the existing portion of the house that we're extending in order to make this. It's rather flat from the rear of the house, and from the alley you really can't see the peak of that roof, but we are maintaining those lines and that roof shape. Below, on the 1-story mudroom addition on the corner, we have a small hipped standing seam roof that leads out onto this large porch that'll include a dining terrace and a small set of steps. Again, an example of the existing conditions. We're removing this section of roof in order to extend that. The windows, these are non-original. These were part of remodeling in the late 80s, early 90s, and the porch in the back. Have the next slide, please. The new windows obviously will look like the old ones. Our rear addition, we are taking a number of cues from the existing house. This is a craftsman style house. It's predominantly stucco, has a number of half timbering elements to it, which you can see on the front of the house here. We've taken the cues for this addition from that. We've created a deep, almost board and batten profile for that in order to pick up on the shadow lines. This is a heavily wooded rear yard. We're interested in what the dappling of the sunlight will do on the side of this house, so we've introduced a horizontal shiplap siding, think nickel gap siding, horizontally with these large vertical panels, and then a section of stucco across. The base of the addition will be stucco that will continue the color of the house around. So this addition will appear new, innovative, and of its own time, but will take all of the elements of the existing house, the trim conditions extrapolated from the half timbering on the house, the stucco, and the proportions of the existing structure. If I could, okay, and from the side there again there's the section of that hipped roof that we're removing, the porch in the back. The next slide, please. We are introducing a new window in portion of the mudroom and in the master suite, new windows on the side. The proportions of these windows align with the head conditions. We have made these taller to gain more light and more view out of the back of the house. As you'll recall from the site plan and the roof plan, this is set back from the side. It's not visible from the side yard of the house, and therefore takes advantage of the new language and the new forms in the rear of the house. From the other side, we're removing a series of these high windows that were part of the previous renovation. Our next slide, please. And introducing stucco as an extension of the sidewall of the house to create that panel, and then the addition in the back, and again keeping that roof form as it slides out. The fenestration on the porch and the deck system is very similar to what we're doing with the rest of the house. Tall vertical lines trying to accentuate the height of this house and take advantage of the craftsman details that are also exhibited on the inside of the house. The woodwork and railings and things on the inside of this house are quite nice and relatively original. The previous owner had done quite a bit of remodeling over the time and did a nice job with it. So we're continuing a little bit of that from the inside out. If I could have the next slide, please. A couple of renderings of how we're achieving this. You can see that hipped roof on the back, the hipped roof extending as a continuation of that gable, the stucco line coming around the corner of our 2-story addition, and then a small step on the inside where we begin the shiplap siding and the surface of this entry porch, using again the tall vertical lines that are reminiscent of the craftsman style, these tall windows with similar glazing features as the rest of the house, and then the panelization I talked about earlier, picking up on the depth to take advantage of the light and the way the light falls across this particular structure. From the other side, we have set this wall continuous with the existing stucco. We do have a small return on the side in order to differentiate this addition. The cornice line and the trim board around picks up on the rest of the house. So this is architecturally a way for us to make a transition between the new addition and the stucco on the side of the house. Again, this is relatively relatively obscured from the public way. It would be very difficult to see it. The predominant view from the alley is this in the back, and the views from the side, because the addition is set in from the two sides, is relatively invisible, as it were, from the main street on Forest. So I think there's one more slide. Yeah, and then a view looking at the back of the house. Again, you know, these views are a bit deceptive. This is as if you were a bird about to crash into the second floor. From lower, again, you really understand this cornice and this soffit. You really don't get a feeling for that, even if you're standing in the alley with your back against the opposite property. So, see the next slide if we have it. The existing house has a number of Marvin windows in it. They're not all original. There are several original windows in the house. It's our intention as we work with this client to continue replacing degraded windows or unsalvageable windows throughout the house with the Marvin windows, which is the Ultimate Landmark Series window that was previously approved. We're asking for you to approve it for this edition. It's not our intention right now to replace any other windows, but as we go through, we may come back to the commission. The idea would be that this is our roadmap for how we would address the rest of these windows to limit mismatched grouping of windows on this particular house. And I think just those cut sheets are about it. And Kate had asked me for some indication of what this was. You can see that these are storm panels that probably came from Evanston glass, and they're attached to the wood framing with machine screws, so they'll be easy to remove.
Okay, thank you. Are there questions by commissioners? Go ahead.
Hi, Gary. The 2D elevation of the windows on the rear of the house shows a vertical mutton bar in the middle coming all the way down to the bottom of the sash, but the 3D rendering shows that ending at the...
Go back to that.
I assume the rendering is the more accurate.
That's correct. Yeah, we wouldn't drop a mullion down the middle.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, in comparing the rendering to the elevations, you know, I looked at them and said, oh, okay, the piece on the back is got horizontal siding on it, and I suspected that it was to differentiate that piece as a porch, which is added on, although it's very large to read simply as a porch. And what I'm wondering about, I started wondering about that when I saw the renderings, which actually show that as stucco. And I'm wondering about why you made the choice at the end of the day, and then...
If you could go back to the rendering for me.
I mean, the piece is so big, I wonder why
You're talking about the lower porch, Stuart?
No, I'm
this section,
that all.
or about this one?
There are no unless I'm going blind, which is a possibility.
These are horizontal.
Oh,
within these panels are horizontal nickel gap panels.
You know.
So
what?
there is siding, as it were.
It absolutely doesn't show in. Oh, I just enlarged this on my screen, and in addition to what John pointed out, which is that you've got basically a horizontal mutton and then 4 divisions above it, which is different from the rendering. Can you blow that up?
It reads but you're saying it's...
Yeah.
Kate. Horizontal lines.
On the flat elevations, yes.
Yeah.
And these are also horizontal lines within these panels. That is a flat
you're talking about the timbering.
That's between the timbering is a horizontal
in the elevations,
nickel gap or shiplap panel.
I'm saying the minute I saw the renderings, I wondered whether or not, because of the size of this thing and the way it's added onto the back, whether you had considered stucco, which is what I think is shown here.
No, well, if you were to look very, very closely, you would find some very, very faint line work in there. I don't disagree with you.
I think the point is
the renderings are not always as accurate as we'd like them to be. We spend a lot of time highly stylizing a lot of these in order to not have that happen, but I assure you that within these panels, the intention is horizontal nickel gap paneling.
Okay. I have another question. Well, the rendering shows the gable end window a little bit differently from what's actually there.
Which you're talking about this one?
You know, generally, while we don't require floor plans, many of the people submitting give us floor plans, which I find incredibly useful to understand decisions people are making about new windows, heads and sills of windows, and understanding what is actually behind that. So my question is, I'm assuming that you've gone to this low-hip roof to not interfere with that window because there's finished space behind that. Is that correct, or is that just attic?
You're talking about this?
No, the gable end window. Where's the gable? There you go, that one.
That's an existing window. And
No, I know. What's behind it?
There's an attic bedroom up there.
That's
But
what I
it's
was
not part
asking.
of our project.
Okay, so
That's an
then the
existing
low-hip
window.
roof is generated by the
That's
desire
correct.
not to have to alter or change that window.
Well,
Good.
and as I said, we've continued this roof line, which is part of the original structure of the house.
Yeah.
We have continued that out in order to take advantage of that hipped condition in our addition, so.
No, Gary, I think it's a nice addition.
Thank you.
Okay? I'm just asking questions to try and understand the sequence of decisions. The other thing, because you cite craftsman stuff, if you look at the front of the house, because it wasn't real structural timbering,
Very nearly flush.
the boards are actually a device to organize windows. So I'm wondering, because it's not happening on the front of the house and certainly not happening on the side of the house, why you do, you know, if you think of the front of Wright's, Ward Willett's house, where the tall casement windows are grouped vertically, but it's just a vertical panel, I'm wondering why you decided to wrap all of that trim system around the house where it doesn't go anywhere. It just sort of stops against the existing house.
Well, for two reasons. We wanted very much to differentiate this addition from the interior. And again,
Okay.
I appreciate that interior floor plans and design decisions for the interiors of these projects are not germane to the preservation's decision-making. Our client wanted a very modern and open project, and it was important to us to create an addition that spoke to the interior, the openness, and the brightness of the space. She came to us with a history of having grown up taking advantage of Japanese tea houses, and we took that as a jumping off point, and part of the inspiration for how we interpreted this craftsman paneling came from some of the very modern and very articulated Japanese tea houses, which are highly detailed and highly crafted, not unlike craftsman houses. So that I think speaks to your point as to why we chose to differentiate those spaces as we turn the corner. But again, as it relates to these standards, in addition to an existing historic house, should be differentiated, should be able to be removed and leave the existing structure unaffected. And I think this addition would do just that. Not that I would want anyone to ever remove it, but.
Are there any other questions? If there are no questions, is someone ready to make a motion? Stuart?
I move we grant 650 Forest Avenue. I move that we grant 650 Forest Avenue, 22 Press 0080, a request to demolish an existing rear-story addition and construct a new story addition with an open wood deck at the back of the house and replace the existing front porch windows. Applicable standards: demolition 1 through 5, alteration 1 through 10, construction 1 through 5, 7 through 8, and 10 and 15.
Is there a second?
Second.
Carl, second. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 8-0.
You didn't ask for public comment, just. No? Okay.
Sorry. Okay.
Should I stay here?
You should stay.
I should stay. Thank you.
Okay, do you want to read it into record? Next case? Or do you want me to? I'll do it while you're. Next case is 701 Forest Avenue in the Lakeshore Historic District, a landmark building that is proposing to construct a second-story addition and rear two-story addition to an existing detached garage.
Again, my name is Gary Shoemaker. I'm with Shoemaker Design Associates. I'm here representing the clients at 701 Forest Avenue. Some of you may remember this project. We've been fortunate enough to be able to have done a number of renovations with this family. They've been a fabulous family to work with, and we've enjoyed every moment of this process. They came to us most recently and asked for us to help them rebuild the garage in the back of the house. When they purchased the house, the existing brick garage that you see was covered in ivy. And being Cubs fans, that was pretty important to them. So they've come to us now and said they'd like to remodel this garage and expand it so that it can become a safe place to park cars. It is a very old garage with very low openings, and it's difficult to get modern cars into this one. So our proposal here is to salvage the first floor volume of this garage, and to construct an addition on top of it and a small one-story addition to the side. This would be mostly 2-car storage, some bikes and some paddle boards and whatnot, and then it would also be an exercise space on the second floor. It is not a coach house. There is storage, but there is usable space on the second floor. We're not plumbing it, so if that were to come up as a question. If I could have the next, there we go. So again, this is the existing garage. This is the proposed addition on the first level that we're asking for. There's the footprint of the existing. There are 4 bays here. It's not big enough for 4 cars, as it were. If I could have the next slide, please. We've provided here, this is an existing footprint of the garage that we're planning to disassemble and reconfigure. Our intention is to retain the 2 openings on the garage now and to rework the last one, and you saw those steel windows in the back of the garage. The steel windows we don't believe to be original. A lot of this garage was cobbled together and remodeled over the course of its long life, including some floor slab work and things like that. So, a roof plan showing that what we have done, and we'll look at in a moment. We'll look at a picture of the main house. This is one of the few intact Italian 8s that retained its tower. We've done a lot of work to stabilize and renovate that tower over the years. So we've taken a cue from that tower and creating this hipped roof structure on top with 2 flat seam metal roof dormers, one facing the main house and one facing to the north in order to capture some light for some workout space and habitable space on the second floor. This is a small 1-story addition that allows us to get a stair up to the upper section and also to minimize the bulk in the backyard. If you could go to the next slide for me. This is the existing garage. The dark section is the section of brick that we'll be taking down to repurpose on the rest of the addition, and that's on both ends. This is the section of the garage in the rear that we'll be retaining. Those are the existing steel windows. We'll modify those openings. The windows are not salvageable. They're rusted completely through, and most have broken glass in them. This fence structure is part of a landscaping project that was part of a project that we did in the most recent. We'll be retaining that. So the only thing we're asking to do in terms of fence work is to recreate that gate on the other side, which is an existing gate. So we'll replicate it if we can't salvage it and reinstall it. If we can have the next slide, please. These are the proposed elevations of the garage. You can see the brick section at the bottom. With the salvaged brick, we're going to create a soldier course on top of which we'll set the new structure. The siding, the trim conditions, the brackets, the dental work will all be replicated. You can see those sections on the main body of the house. I don't think anyone here was on the commission at the time. When we did the original 2 projects, we replicated a great number of these that were deteriorated and broken. A lot of the finials had snapped off. So we'll be using the same millworkers to recreate those details around this garage. This is obviously the garage side. This is the cross gable that I talked about a moment ago. This is a small dormer on the back side that allows us to get a stair up to the second level. This is an existing motorized gate, and this is the face of the existing garage. So the location of this motorized gate will continue to park as it always has in front of that 4th bay. This is that north-facing dormer that I mentioned that has the flat seam metal roof on it. This is a bay reminiscent of the front facade of the tower that has a French door in it and a Juliet balcony that allows some fresh air and some light into that upper section. And these are the windows that we're salvaging in the bottom. Also picking up on some of the landscaping items, the rear yard is surrounded by trellises that have growing ivies and forsythia and things on them, so we're going to recreate some of that on the back of the house as well. If you go to the next slide there. We've provided a contextual section to show you the relationship of the rear of the main house to the front. Unfortunately, we don't have a drawing all the way to the front, but the rear portion of this house is about half a story lower than the front story. So when you see this house from the street, I assume you've all walked past it, it's much taller in the front than it is in the back. We've done what we can to keep the ridge of this main structure just below and to try to approximate a connection visually between this addition, which we did some years ago, and the cornice line of the new garage. The detail work, dental work, brackets, and fascia of this addition will mimic what we're doing on this, which is a slightly smaller version of what the main house has all the way around the upper sections. And there obviously was the existing garage. This is looking at it from the other end. You can see the deck structure and the mudroom addition that was part of our previous project with them, and then the end elevation of the garage structure. So again, there's the masonry. The upper section is siding, details, and clapboard to match the existing house. Next slide, please. Stuart, we've rendered this one a little bit more clearly for you. So again, the color scheme on this house was not an exact replica of the original house, but we did do some exploration and some testing of paints to get back to the original paints. This will be a continuation of that same paint scheme. And what you can see is because we want this house, this garage structure from the public way, which is the alley, to appear a little bit more cohesive, we are not using masonry on the back side of the house as it comes down and meets the alley. So from the back, this is a fully clapboard and painted wood structure. You can see that behind that gate, we've retained the masonry, and behind this gate, as it returns down the side, this is the corner that begins the addition that we're proposing on the first level. So unless you're invited into the backyard, you won't know there's brick back there. So taking it to the next slide, there's the flat elevation as you pass the garage in the alley, and then this is the view of the garage from the rear yard. We've used this long slope to create a backdrop, which is not dissimilar from the original garage that's there, although that roof is not quite as steep. The details of this bay reminiscent of the front bay on the main house, and then the gutters and downspouts are half round galvanized aluminum, which also replicate what's on the main house. And you can see some of the trellis work that's existing. Not all this is existing. We're not proposing anything other than to continue some of that language onto the facade of the back of the house, or the back of the coach house. And a couple of extra renderings to show you this is what the neighbors and what you'll see from behind. Again, we love the brick on the house. We think it's appropriate, but in the interest of consistency with the historic fabric, you wouldn't see it from outside of the fence.
So, Gary, I think you've done a nice job of presenting the project, and I would like to compliment you. I think it's a lovely addition, which is beautifully done, and I particularly admire the way in which you've adapted the primary features of the existing house and modified them to use in the garage. I compliment you on that. Having said that, in your previous presentation, you suggested that the addition on the back was different because the Secretary of the Interior Standards called for that, but you are aware that the Secretary of the Interior Standards suggests that you shouldn't ever do what you're showing here, which is to replicate historic details. So you are picking and choosing, but that's okay because our standards have pretty much thrown out the original Secretary of the Interior Standards as something that architects no longer feel should be applied.
I can't disagree with that. Every project's presentation is different, and every development of the projects are taken with a different tack, so.
I'm just going to add, I think it's a great project, it's a great presentation, but when visiting and just looking at the site, there was a very mature tree that's right by the fence. Is that going to be
No.
addressed in any way?
If you notice that it is actually crushing the fence, it has one dying limb that we are going to remove. It's the one that crosses the.
It goes over
It's
the
the one that crosses the fence. We built the fence around it many years ago, but it hasn't improved, so we're going to remove that limb. So, but the tree will be just fine.
Any other questions by commissioners? Would someone like to make a motion?
Well, I'll make a motion again. If you.
Thank you.
I move that we approve 701 Forest Avenue, 22 Press 0066, a two-story addition and to an existing detached garage, applicable standards, alteration 1 through 10, construction 1 through 8, and 10 through 15.
Is there a second? Like a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 8-0.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, our next case is 1223 Oak Avenue in the Ridge Historic District. This is a construction of a single-story entry addition at the north elevation and the demolition of the existing two-car garage and construction of a new car garage.
Good evening, Commission. I appreciate the opportunity to approach the podium and take off my mask. And speak to you about this project. So, my name is David Emmerich. I am co-owner of the property with my wife, Catherine. We live there with our two children. They're at 1223 Oak Avenue. So I had a prior career in architecture when I worked with nationally prominent firms in Colorado and Michigan addressing historic preservation and adaptive reuse. My primary work now is in other fields, and so we've worked closely with longtime friend, Evanston resident and architect Diane Zabich to bring this proposal to you. I'm speaking this evening given familiarity with both the project and the site's history. So we've previously executed renovation and an addition at our old home on 2020 Maple Avenue to improve the functionality for use, correct structural issues, and composition of the rear elevation from a series of haphazard additions. We relocated to 1223 Oak a year ago and have taken some time to understand the history of the house and the character of the neighborhood, both within the historic district and extending to the broader central Evanston area. In fact, our neighborhood's featuring prominently here. I don't know if every session is exciting, but I'm pleased to be here. In fact, in that search to understand character, my children will tell you that they cringe that I ask that our walks include trips down alleys to photograph the different garage types. The history of the house. This house was constructed in the early 1890s by a builder of many homes of Maple Avenue and 3 adjacent to this site. This history has been helpful in understanding our home and the neighboring structures. There's an interesting history in that for our home, the lot immediately south and 2 north were owned by the owner of this property originally. The back 50 feet of each of those was subdivided off, and the property owner was a builder who built the adjacent homes across all 4 lots, and that spanning sort of subdivision held a barn and held a carpentry shop and office for the business. So we understand that the original owner ran his business out of the house and retained 2 accessory structures at the rear of the adjoining lots. A review at the History Center suggests these were carpentry and barn, as I mentioned. This does play into our approach, so hold on to that thought. It was only in the mid-20th century that a portion was sold back to 1223 Oak to construct the single-story garage with a low, hip-shaped roof, explaining the mid-century proportions and materials. This evening, I am seeking approval for a one-story side entry addition, the demolition of a one-story garage, and the construction of a two-story garage to replace. I'll highlight for you, the top drawing is existing conditions. You can see to the right the square that represents the single-story hip garage, I think built circa 1969. Oak Avenue is to the left. And so we are proposing an addition which is north of the main house, use as a right and with no application for zoning minor or otherwise. Same for the new two-story garage to the east end of the lot. So, Kate, if you could move us to slide A3. Those are floor plans of the entry, but this one might be helpful to articulate the addition. Let me say that we are fortunate to have the responsibility of stewards of this home, which to our knowledge has only had 5 previous owners. The home retains many of the original fixtures and features, including wood double-hung windows in good working order, though with aluminum triple track storms, and the interior hardware is very much intact, door hinges, etc., including the skeleton-keyed lock set at the formal front entry. For that reason and the location of the garage, the rear side entry is really our day-to-day point of entry. Unfortunately, the door opens to a very modest 3x6 stair landing with flights down to basement and up to kitchen. As you can imagine, the pile of shoes and jackets need to be accommodated. Fortunately, there is good and contextually appropriate precedence on the house, and I would direct you, well, Kate, can we go back to the plan? Sorry. Yeah, so you can see on either of those, there are some bump outs on the south side. The one further to the west or to the left was done in about 1915. There's sun porches, very low, if not flat roof on that one. And to the right, I think done circa 1990s, which has a skylight and modestly hipped roof. It is done in a very contextually appropriate manner, stucco at the bottom and shingle siding for the top half to match. So the approach here for the new entry is to hew closely to historic context with architectural cues taken directly from the existing residence and dealing of trim, eaves, material transitions, finishes, and color selection to follow the patterns found on the historic home. If we can turn to A7, and along the way, these are some plans for the proposed garage. I would start by sharing that the motivation for the garage, based on the low-sloped hip roof and large format horizontal hardboard siding, as I noted before, I believe the current garage to be mid-century construction, and this structure has outlived its original purpose. It has a cracked slab. It's constructed slab on grade. There is a 7-foot overhead garage door. It is insufficient space to hold our cars, bikes, and gardening tools. More importantly, the slab is cracked, moisture seeps in, top of the concrete is not set appropriate relative to the adjacent grade. The jambs are warped with the roofing being beyond useful life. So our approach in thinking about a replacement has been to honor the historic characteristics and precedents that formed the historic character of this particular space. With that, I'd like to highlight the history of the accessory structures on this alley. And if I can approach, I realized in looking at what we had put together and submitting to you, Cade, that there was some additional context that might be helpful. So I just have 3 sets that you can share of some. In the set, you saw the rendering that is sort of an alley view, but it doesn't have as clear a picture of the adjacent property to the south face. My understanding is that was a barn, and so let me note that the homes on Maple are to the east of us. Lengthy discussion this evening about those. Are grander and reflected the class of their owners, and that garages were often ancillary expressions of the main house. Mr. Turkson's home is a great example. We butt up to each other. He has a grand Victorian. His garage is dressed as grand. I'm sure it housed a livery at one point. Alternatively, the homes on Oak, south of Dempster, are scaled-down versions of the Queen Anne and shingle-style models on Maple, or even simpler farmhouse style, suitable for Evanston's trade and professional class that occupy the street. Similar to the barn constructed by the owner of 1223 Oak, the property south of us has a single-gabled, two-story garage, purportedly originally serving as a hay barn for the grander, more elaborate coach house across the alley. So therefore, we are proposing a simple single-gabled structure with scale and massing subordinate to both the house and to the two large adjacent accessory structures. The openings most visible from the public way would be similar in size and configuration to those found on the house, double hung with divide upper light, and we have detailed a board and batten configuration done in like a cementitious hardy board, painted to complement the color and configuration of the main house. So I will stop there and see if I can answer any questions you may have.
Are there any questions?
So I kind of like the garage as a barn, and I saw the package, and there's actually something with board and batten siding down the block that looks like it had been a barn. And I'm wondering why, given the material palette of the existing house, which is a combination of shingles and stucco, you decided to do this as board and batten rather than utilizing the material vocabulary of the house.
Sure, great question and happy to address. So I think to that type of approach, that's what we have taken for the entry, and that should look as if it is consistent with the home. For the garage, I think that we're looking for it to be an expression of, it is an ancillary, very functional. To be clear, this is not an accessory dwelling unit. This is for storage of vehicles and, other elements. So I think that speaks to the why of the visual distinction in terms of the exterior treatment. We did entertain whether this should be board and batten versus a horizontal oriented siding, and we simply went with board and batten. So I hope that answers your question.
Any other questions?
I have just a quick question. Is this Amerilux, is that going to be like opaque or translucent, or?
So you may be more familiar with that as it's like a double walled. So it offers three major benefits. It's translucent, so light can pass through. It's lightweight and has some good insulating properties, but it's also resistant to impact. So it offers some security. Now we've decided to put the windows in the gable at the top there. Those mimic what occurs in the gable end, both east and west of the main house. And down here lower, which actually would probably not be readily viewable from either behind privacy fence or vegetation, is where we're using this. It's sometimes a trade name Polygal is used. I have a sample if it would be helpful to see it.
Sure, I was just wondering, if it.
Thank you. Yeah.
It would be nice to know more about the material. John is the other architect on the panel. Do you know what that stuff actually looks like?
I do not.
Any familiarity?
I'm
with
happy
it?
to share a sample of
Do you?
it.
Oh, that's wonderful that you brought that. Thank you.
This still has its, shipping stuff on it. You'll be familiar, like greenhouses are often built out of this. So is this a historically precedented material? No, but I think the issue is we're looking to shape and trimming of this material to be what we get our consistency.
So this goes in a frame? I'm just going to ask that.
That's right.
Go ahead.
It sits in a
wood frame?
Aluminum angle frame.
Oh.
It's almost visually, you wouldn't notice it, so then it has to be trimmed out with wood like you would trim the more historic double hung and fixed window.
So it's glazed into a channel and then trimmed with wood? Okay. And tell us again why you decided to use that rather than a thermopane window?
Certainly. So on the ends that are more proximate to the public way, which is, out of view in some ways, it offers light transparency. It has insulating properties, but it is impact resistant. So as opposed to having some glass windows that someone could smash and gain access, it is more impact resistant.
Okay. I have just one more comment about the addition, which the little bump out, which I think will work very well for you in terms of what you're looking for. And as a commissioner, I shouldn't say this to you or make suggestions, but the back wall, which you indicate is a bench and cabinetry, if you put a bench over that window, you'd bring in more light. I know you'd have more heat loss, but it would really make a difference in terms of what that blank facade on that little bump looks like.
We did weigh that. We have, openings of 4 sides to that very small footprint. We have openings, one of which we intend to reuse the existing panel door. And frankly, our neighbor's view angle from their dining room will be looking at the eastward door opening.
Yeah, you didn't have to address that because it's not intended as a criticism.
Sure.
Is a commissioner ready to make a motion on this case? Mark?
I move that we approve a certificate of appropriateness for 1223 Oak Avenue in the Ridge Historic District, 22 Pres 0082, to construct a single-story entry addition to the north elevation of the residence, to demolish the existing garage and construct a new 2-car frame garage with ground floor workshop and storage area. The applicable standards are demolition 1 through 5, alteration 1 through 10, construction 1 through 8, and 10 through 16.
Is there a second? Janie seconds. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries 8-0. Thank you very much.
Take care.
Okay, our last case. 2241 Sherman Avenue in the Northeast Historic District. An application to demolish an existing rear sunroom and wood deck and construct a new 2-story addition with screen porch and wood deck.
Hi, everyone. My name is Thomas Alleman. I'm the owner of Studio Talo Architecture, and I'm representing Jackie and Jim McGuire in this addition to their project in the Historic District. I guess as you can see, there's a sort of a front entry porch at the north end, and at the rear there's an existing porch of about the same size. You can go to the next. So the charge to us was to expand a very small kitchen that's kind of tucked into the corner and make a space where they could have family come to visit and stay with them. So the brief for us was to create a suite on the second floor where there's sort of three bedrooms, and like I said, expand the first floor, which doesn't lend itself well to having people over. And also include a mudroom and a screen porch, which you see there. So the biggest challenge. Jim's my landlord, and I had to get this right. And the challenge was that there's already a dormer on the back. If you look at the existing and proposed east elevation, that's the front, the side. You can see the brick. There was a dormer, and that is finished space up there. And the charge was to incorporate that the addition to the first floor, the ensuite on the second floor, while keeping that bathroom, which lies behind the dormer, as intact as possible. So that really drove the studies of the roof shape, and we felt like the gable, it's a very simple forms, unadorned, and we felt that the large gable at the back kind of checked both boxes of fitting in with the house and the massing, and allowing us to keep that bathroom up there. You can see we're kind of paying an homage to the front entry as well as the existing back porch, which is just too small to accommodate any of the functions that they need, with the mudroom, and then the shed of the screen porch to the right of that. So that's the existing north elevation. And so you can see the fenestration is a bit all over the map on the original north elevation, and we've tried to bring some order with the window locations on the addition. The size and types of the windows fit with what the house already has. And so we've continued that base of brick around to the rear, so you're looking at the rear on the right. And then if we can save the brick, we'd love to, but we're not saying we will because we don't know what kind of shape it's going to be in when we take it down. But reiterating the brick piers that the front of the house has with the mudroom. Jim and Jackie built a garage with a coach house, and the coach house, if you look at the site plan, has there's access from the alley, but there's also a curb cut, and there's access from the front. And so the garage doors facing the street allow them to keep the drive, and it's a really convenient. What we were striving for was a really convenient mudroom, kind of side rear access, and that's what the mudroom provides there. So there you can see the view kind of past the relatively new coach house in the middle at the bottom, and that will face the addition at the back, and you can see the original, the front of the house there. So the brick, so the addition is stucco. The windows are Marvin signature aluminum clad wood windows, and the roof will be shingle, asphalt shingle to match the color of the existing roof, and the band of brick kind of ties the new and old together, at least we hope so.
Are there any questions?
I have one quick question. Could you address the south elevation? I think we kind of skipped that, and it has a different pattern of fenestration and size of window that's pretty notable.
So the south, sure. So going from left to right, there's that's the front door that you're looking at that faces the drive down the length of the lot, and the addition, you can see the stucco is slightly different. So that has the kind of the program going on behind there is different than the program going on to the left. So to the left, there are bedrooms, and then the windows next to the fireplace. To the right, in the addition, these are the windows in the kitchen, and then in the bathroom above, where privacy wouldn't need a large double hung window. And then at the entry, the clear story, or excuse me, the transom echoes the transom at the front door, and the double hung windows there. We're getting light into the mudroom is, privacy is not so much of a concern there. That fits with the rest of the double hung windows in the home.
Yeah, the awning windows that Cade mentioned do seem out of keeping with the kind of both the composition and the type of fenestration in the rest of the house. And I have a question that the two lower horizontal ones, and thank you for including the plan. They're on either side of the kitchen hood, and I am not sure, given the level change in the stairs going up, are those two horizontal awning windows underneath the upper cabinets, or are they above the upper cabinets?
Those are above the upper cabinets.
Above the upper cabinets. Yeah. Okay.
So it's the
And-
south, and it's a way, rather than it being a
Yes.
blank, rather than it being a blank facade, it was a way to bring in some. I mean, it is south.
Yeah.
It made sense for the kitchen to be on that side, but it's a way to bring some light into the.
And the other awning window is actually in the shower, and I'm wondering could you use a square window like the ones that are shown in the old part of the facade, or would that lower the level of the sill below chin level for somebody showering?
I think there's no reason other than this was their preference that it couldn't be a square window. I think because we knew we had wider, flatter, shorter windows below, adding another window would just maybe seem a bit out of place. And the higher sill kind of works for privacy. The wider width provides a little bit more light.
It's in the shower, and windows in the shower, you need a splash panel, and they're problematical in terms of condensation. In terms of lighting the space, did you look at the possibility of putting a vertical double hung between the two, spreading the sinks and putting it sitting on the counter and going up to the ceiling as a way to light that space? Because I am assuming you have glass doors into the shower.
Yeah, glass doors to the shower. And as you can see, the skylight that you're looking at above the bathroom there is centered on the vanity.
Oh, is that that's lighting the bathroom?
Right,
Okay.
yeah. And just with mirror and lighting above the vanity, windows just didn't seem to have been a bit forced.
I mean, I think it's a very nice addition, and it's nicely done. Like Cade, I guess the only question I have is the horizontal awning windows really seem like, they're in terms of the style and proportion and organization of all the openings in the rest of the house, they seem a little bit from left field.
They are different, it's true. I think two things. One, the kind of the irregularity of fenestration on the house. I mean, I think it's good to look at the north elevation before you look at this. I think that kind of sets the bar for side elevation fenestration. And it basically what the house is saying, we're going to put windows where it makes sense for the interior on the sides, and we're going to make them symmetrical and kind of, put on their Sunday best when we're facing the street. And so the 21st century version of that is we've got a kitchen cabinetry on the south wall, but we'd love to get some light in, so it's very functional to have wide windows that are up a little bit higher.
Yeah.
So it doesn't look like anything other than the sense that the north wall doesn't really look like anything else in the house either.
So the awning window on the north elevation is, I'm trying to figure out because I'm looking for the bay below it. Is that in the laundry room? No, that's in the office. On the north elevation.
Right.
There's one
it's a
upper window
small,
like that.
Small little room. Next to the pair of double hungs. At the top.
No, not that window. The north elevation.
Yeah.
The north elevation above. Let me get to there's a bay. Sorry. I'm looking at the existing south elevation that has that horizontal hopper in a bedroom, and you're changing that to a double hung, which I think is much nicer.
That's very helpful.
I
Could you show the south? Kate, could you put up what he's
other,
showing?
Other
existing
awning windows.
Yeah.
like
So there is that, and so we're. It makes sense with the design to make that a double hung now.
Okay, are there any other questions? Go ahead, Carlos.
Hi, Tom, I have some questions about the scale of the addition, and also the floor plan shows that in one side you have a pronounced setback and the other one does not. It's very minimal. I'm a little bit concerned about the scale. And is there a way to make sure that the addition would not be overwhelming the scale of the house?
I'm not sure how to. So making it smaller would do that.
Well, I don't know. I think that it's unusual to see such a almost the same area doubling the size of the house. And I'm not suggesting it's bad or wrong. I'm just because we are acting on or reacting to your proposal, and it might be that it's appropriate in the context of things, but in other circumstances may not be. I wonder if you could just elaborate the reason behind why it's so big compared to the...
I would put the perspectives up.
From the rear?
Yeah,
From rear perspectives.
The rear perspectives.
Well, so I guess there are two architects up there. For those of you that aren't architects, we don't necessarily write the design brief. That usually comes fairly fully baked to us in the form of we'd like a kitchen and a dining room and a living room where we can entertain when our kids and their kids come, and we'd like an ensuite that's a little bit nicer. So that's what we were handed, and I felt like the simplicity of the gable roof that's with the ridge parallel to the street, solving the problem of the dormers at the back, that a simple gable would be the most compatible roof form, and the spaced out double hung windows. You're right, the original house is extremely small for the street that it's on. There's some very large houses on Sherman. So I personally, I'll defer to my clients on how big they need their house to be, but for me as an architect, it doesn't seem like it's out of place in the community, in the local area there.
I think some of this is the reaction that you may get from the neighbors. I don't think there's comments on this. No. And I can assure you that some of the circumstances and location probably have more comments than you will imagine. So I just want to address that.
Sure.
That the commission is actually reviewing a project for its own merits, and the contextual part of it is addressed properly.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, I would just add, that block has several historic rooming houses that are large, like you said. So, I guess that addition, while it is a large addition, it is with that size is already present on the block. So I think it's, it's compatible that way, in a sense.
Every time I come to one of these, I'm reminded that every single architect that gets up in front of you shows you how beautiful their building is and then doesn't show the neighbors, and I'm guilty of that too. And if I had done that, you would see that the neighbor to the north is way larger than this house. So in the context of it, it's just...
And I think that's important for the record, basically.
Yeah. So I apologize for leaving that out.
I think the choice to make a cross gable is for the back addition is obvious. There really isn't anything else you could do. I think that the drawings for me are completely convincing in terms of the way the piece is integrated into the house. You have a little setback where you go to the addition, and I assume that's a choice about not restuccoing the whole house in terms of those surfaces, so that makes sense to me as well, although having actually picked up the bottom of the gable and extended it horizontally would have been nice, but I think that you've handled all of that really skillfully. My only reservations are the awning windows on the south side. Otherwise, I personally think that it's very handsomely and skillfully done.
Thank you.
And one more question. For the height of the addition and that gable that comes out, can you explain, I was just looking at the attic plan, and I was just trying to see why you needed to match the height of the new gable to the existing height of the roof. Maybe it could have been slightly lower or whatever, just to help that scale a little bit. But then, and so I was looking at the attic plan just to see what was going on under there and what that window was for in the back. And it's a raised deck for a tall bedroom, ceiling and attic storage. Can you just explain that to me?
Sure, I'll address the first part of your question, which is why the gable roof is so high.
Okay.
So if you go to the existing rear elevation, the existing east elevation, went right by it. There you go. So there's a dormer on the left. You see the dormer?
Yeah.
Okay. That dormer is finished space. The attic was finished. There's a bathroom behind there. And some people that live in the house didn't want to lose that because it was done not that long ago. So part of the first, if you had to solve the roof, and the only way to leave, we did several cross-section studies to show that we could still use the shower, still use the bathroom that they created by getting as high as we could and still respecting the existing roof line. So it's really a matter of preserving work that was done.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So it looks like you're matching the pitch on that back gable, and additionally, you're making a rather spectacular double height master bedroom, utilizing that space. So,
yeah, I mean it's a raised ceiling. The ceiling of the roof does not go all the way up. So what you were referring to with the raised deck is that the bathroom is salvaged, but now it has an attic behind it. And so the window, what was the window opening for the attic in the east wall is a way into essentially storage space. It's an attic.
Yeah, yeah. Got it.
so in the proposed east elevation, the double windows that we see in the gable end are actually top lighting that room?
No, it's...
Or they're into the attic?
They're into the attic,
Oh,
yeah.
let me look at the upper plan again.
The ceiling of the bedroom under the floor below is a higher ceiling, right?
It's a slightly higher
That's
ceiling.
what- yeah.
Right, so there's like a tray
So
and then
the
it goes
floor-
up.
The floor behind the bathroom is slightly higher. Okay.
Right,
Yeah.
yeah.
Gee, it'd be wonderful if that was actually somehow cut out and it was top lighting your high ceiling bedroom, but
We talked about that. It would make...
Didn't want it.
Make it pretty grand.
Are there any other questions? Would someone like to make a motion? Jamie? Thank you.
For case 22 Press 0079, the property at 2241 Sherman Avenue in the Northeast Historic District, I move that we issue a certificate of appropriateness to demolish an existing rear sunroom and wood deck and construct a new 2-story frame addition with screen porch and wood deck. Applicable standards: demolition 1 through 5, alteration 1 through 10, construction 1 through 5, 7, 8, and 10 through 15.
Is there a second? I'll second it. Stewart seconds. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries 8-0.
Thank you all so much for staying so late. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Okay. Cade?
Approval of meeting minutes. I received comments from one member that I incorporated. Did anyone else have any comments, revisions?
Someone make a motion to approve?
I make a motion to approve the minutes for May 10th, 2022.
Is there a second? I'll second. Beth seconds. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, Jamie abstained. 7-4, Jamie abstained. Okay. Kay, do you want to give an update on the Downtown Heritage Resource Survey?
Yeah, the only update I'll give is that we were asked to take more of kind of a manageable bite out of our previous discussion. And the way that was suggested was to have a 4-phased approach. The first phase being evaluation of the built resources in the downtown, particularly evaluation of that supplemental list of potentially eligible or significant or contributing buildings that was put together. Is about 30 on that list. I think then if we're agreeable to that, it's more determining the process. If it's something that we'd like to do as a full group, that just means we'd have to provide public notice and give a location that the tour would start, and then provide a map of kind of our general direction. That's one option. We could split up into groups of 3 commissioners that could be, they could survey different areas and then come back and report, or we could set up like an evaluation subcommittee or something that could work independently and then report back to the commission. So I think that's probably the only thing I'd like to try to figure out tonight.
I mean, I'd be for splitting into groups and then parsing down the list, if everybody is okay with that. That way it's more manageable for people's schedules, and if people are partial to a certain group of buildings. And so why don't we work on getting some dates set up, and then people can maybe, I'm sure with everybody traveling over the summer, why don't we work on who's working together on dates on the same types of times, and then we can talk about what parts of the list that they would like to, as a team, take. Does that work with everybody? Okay, why don't you and I work on that?
Okay, perfect.
Okay, I guess, is there any other discussion topics? Carlos?
No, not at the moment.
The only thing worth mentioning is that I did get the final draft of the long-range work plan to that subcommittee. I'm asking them to prioritize some of those initiatives and add a timeline that they may be implemented. I think the approach for that, instead of, I'd ask them to do that independently, but I think it may make more sense to just convene as a group and kind of work on that just together in a single setting. I think that might be more efficient.
Okay, any other discussion topics? Carl, you want to make a motion to adjourn?
Make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
All right, all in favor? All right, thank you.